Just exactly 30 years ago, in the autumn of 1977, I made 3 films for BBC One about Wales. Each programme portrayed a different Welsh community. In fact, they were part of a much bigger documentary series called The British Connection. Its purpose was to illuminate for viewers across the UK the devolution debate that was raging at that time throughout Scotland and Wales, and which led in the end to the 1979 devolution referendum. In 1977, I made a film about what was then a coal mining village called Ffynnongroyw in northeast Wales. I chose it for several reasons. One important one was that it's very close to the border with England, and yet at that time had maintained a very clear Welsh identity. But I had another even stronger reason to choose this place, because it's where I'm from. I was born there. So, to complete the jigsaw, here's the original film, followed by a present-day revisit to the characters who took part and a chance to catch up with what happened in their lives.
The single most important factor in the growth of Ffynnongroyw was the coal mine at Parlour D, or the Point of Air as it's known in English. Coal started to be mined here in the 1870s, but it wasn't until the 1880s that it really established itself. My father started working there at the age of 15 for £1 a day, and in those days it was a 6-day week with long and arduous shifts. He spent his lifetime there. For 2 miserable years, I followed his footsteps underground when I worked there as a Bevin boy at the end of World War II and hated every minute of it.
This, the well, was the only source of water in the village until the mid-30s. There is a legend that there was a shipwreck once upon a time, and the sailors were washed upon the shore and came across this well, this source of water, and that they called it Ffynnongroyw, the clear crystal well.
The village itself is little more than one long street, the coast road from Chester to Holyhead. And it was probably this road which gave the place its beginning as a village, because until the land was drained to make way for it, the sea came right up to these hills behind it. But in fact, Ffynnongroyw is linked by paths and roads to a number of other small communities, like Tanlan, Talacra, and the village of Penaffordd. And although each of these to the inhabitants is quite distinct, they are all linked through family ties and, perhaps more importantly, by their dependence on Point of Air.
Yn yr hen ddyddiau, baswn ni'n disgrifio pwll Palwr Dyf fel pwll teuluol. Yr rheswm am hynny fod y bechgyn yn dilyn ei tad i'r lofa. Yn y blwyddyn 1926 y dechreuais i, ac mi roedd yr awyrgylch yn y pwll glo ac yn ffiniau'r pwll glo yn Gymreig iawn. Mi roedd na tua'r adeg honno, wrth gwrs, tua 100 o'r merlions ma'n bod i lawr yn y pwll adeg honno. Ac mi roedd rhaid i bob un oedd yn gofalu neu yn calyn o rhaid farfar terma Cymraeg. After a month
supervision down pit, we were given pit ponies. So we'll go to the stable to get a pit pony, and then we used to speak to the horse, gee up, turn round. The horse used to turn his head round, look at us as if to say, well, what you saying? And then some of the old colliers used to come to us and say, well, back then, you shall come I get a kettle now. And then we used to say, well, what does that mean? If you didn't speak Welsh to these pit ponies, they wouldn't move, they wouldn't move. And that's how I learned my Welsh, was working with the pit ponies on the pit here.
I was born in Lancashire, and it was hard to get a job there. And I asked the under-manager from the point of for a job, Mr. Evans, he was. And he said, well, how can I start you here if you can't speak Welsh? Well, I said, I can learn anything to get a job like. So, anyway, I got the job. I went down below, and the fellas there were very good with me. Most of them wouldn't speak English, but there was a fellow in particular, Edward Lloyd. He was a fireman, the boss. And whenever I was stuck, he'd always help me out with a few words. And I managed to get along all right. And as the time went along, well, my Welsh did come a little bit better, but it's still far from being perfect. But I do reckon myself as a Welshman now, especially after being here 60 years.
This is the Garth. It follows a stream which runs out into the sea. And it is probably older than Ffynnongroyw itself. In the old days, this was a completely Welsh neighbourhood. The mill, which was worked by a water wheel, ground grain into flour until the early 50s. And up this path are a number of cottages which could only be in Wales. But today, most of the people who live here have come from England, and the cottages now have English names. Hillside, Kirby View, Rose Cottage. It was in this particular cottage that my father was born. He was the 7th son of Edward and Margaret Lloyd, or Margaret Llwyd, as she was known locally.
My grandfather died when my father was 11 years old, and Margaret Llwyd, my grandmother, had to eke out a living by taking in washing. Margaret Llwyd was quite a character, apparently. She had to carry water from a well up this path. The bucket was carried on her head, and as she went, she knitted furiously. She sometimes took the baby with her. The baby was carried in the bucket, again on her head, and when she arrived at the well, the baby was laid on the grassy bank nearby. The bucket was filled with water, carefully placed on her head, and then she bent down to pick up the baby. But things are very different here now. There is no community, and the characters have disappeared completely.
It was all Welsh one time, but now it's mostly English, really. Although quite a lot can speak Welsh. It's quite a lot can speak Welsh here. But you do see a difference when you go into the public houses and that. It's not as Welsh as it used to be. The publicans, they learn a Welsh word or two here and there, and they manage to get along. As for these houses, these here houses in Ffynnongroyw with all the English people there, they've named them with all English names. Why should they change the names of the places around here? Because you're in Wales, and they should stick to the Welsh names and name places, I think.
This is my 10th year at this colliery. I came from Manchester. And I was a bit apprehensive when I first came down here. And during the first 12 months, I was fairly miserable. But after that, I really settled down, and I got quite a lot of good friends here. And I found no friction at all. And I think this is proved by 3 years ago, I was elected the branch chairman of the PET.
Miners all over the country, you know, are the same. This proved in the two strikes that we had, 1972, 74, they say unity is strength. There's no difference between Scottish miners, English miners, Welsh miners. The covenantship is still there. If there's an explosion in England somewhere or Scotland, say, we feel it. And I think it'd be the same if there was, unfortunately, if there was one here, that they'd feel the same. You feel as if you'd lost one of your brothers.
I put the cart before the horse often. We speak English. We cover this a lot, Sheriff O'Brien. But do we? If the language die, I think we're dead. That's my honest opinion. Wales is finished if the language finished.
I can't see it coming back like it was 23 years ago when I started here, when it was all Welsh. I feel saddened by it, you know, to tell you the truth. I do. I feel very sad about it, but I can't see it coming back.
Music, to me, is a kind of a language or again, a relaxation. I think, after working at the colliery, you know, all day. Tension at times, particularly before a contest. Everybody's on their toes, everyone's in top practice, you know. We just don't go to contests to make numbers up. We go there to win, and nothing less. There's no room at all whatsoever for passengers in our band. We gained first prize this year at Wrexham in the second section of the National Steddfod. To us, it's the highest honour in Wales that we could obviously achieve, to win the Royal National Steddfod.
We're beginning to make a bit of a meal of this thing now. Colin there, when you came in after the Cornish 2 bars, you know, you're slowing up, in a word, right? Let's open the thing out, and Cornish, we're not going on to the bar line. Can I hear the Cornish there, right? 3, 4. Okay, can we run back from 9? Okay, watch that, Colin. Here we go, from 9, trombone. 3, 4.
I grew up in this village, and when I was a boy and a young man in the 30s and 40s, it was a very different place from what it is now. The chapels in those days had excellent attendances. The chapel would be full to capacity, and chairs and benches would have to be brought in. There was also a very keen cultural life in the village. All the chapels had their own literary societies, their drama groups, and their Eisteddfodau, or penny readings, which are miniature Eisteddfodau. And the important point here is that the people making this rich cultural life were the coal miners themselves and their families. But the language of the village in those days was predominantly Welsh. The shops, the street, the pub even, wherever you went, the language was Welsh. The village school was built in 1871 following the Education Act of 1870. My own grandfather, who was a carter, donated £0.50 from his very low wages. Ironically, my father, who later attended this school, experienced the Welsh Not, which was a device to stop Welsh being spoken in the school. So this school, which had been built to educate the community, turned out to be an enemy of the language of the people. The village children now attend the English medium school at Pennefordd or Ysgol Mornant.
Well, this is an area Welsh medium school where the pupils come from villages of Ffynnongroyw, Pennefordd and Gwesbyr. The pupils enter the school at 3.5 years of age into the nursery class. And 20% of the pupils come from homes where both parents are Welsh-speaking. 30% where one parent is Welsh-speaking, and 50% are from non-Welsh-speaking homes. And that is the basic layout of the language pattern. As 50% come in are from non-Welsh-speaking homes. Naturally, these children are not Welsh-speaking when they come at 3.5 years of age. It is a hard task, but we find that after 2 years in the nursery and reception class, that they are beginning to converse, and this is our main aim, is to have these children to converse.